Hi, I'm Justice. I'm a natural health practitioner with Harmony Health Collective, and today I'm just going to go over one of my really simple potato soup recipes that I like to throw together on a night where I really just don't want to cook a huge meal. It's low sodium, it's also pretty healthy, and really yummy. Honestly, more than anything else, it has to be yummy. So I have all my ingredients ready except for my poor carrots that I unfortunately killed before I could put them in the soup, but usually we put carrots in the soup with my celery, potatoes, onion, some thyme, some fresh herbs, and my vegetable stock that it's already pre-made, but it is low sodium, and my bacon, which I use sparingly, but in this recipe it's kind of necessary. So I make sure to get the organic and the sugar-free, excuse me, and I'm just gonna get started. So I start by chopping the bacon because that takes the longest to cook and gives me part of my base.
And then while we're doing this, we're also going to do some questions on adrenal fatigue, and I have a couple questions. And
nobody get on me about my knife skills. I already know. My children are on my case, and I'm like, listen, it's fine. I don't cut myself, so back off me. Don't at me, okay?
No tags. No tags on this. I love it.
I'm just a home cook.
We don't got a chef here, but no culinary stuff. But it's still great.
It's still great. It eats okay. It doesn't matter if it's all perfect. So Molly's going to start with the questions while I'm prepping this part.
So the first question that I have is on adrenal fatigue versus adrenal crisis.
Yeah. So you kind of have to have adrenal fatigue to be in an adrenal crisis, but chances are you didn't know that you were in adrenal fatigue before the crisis, hence the crisis. Adrenal fatigue, you're going to notice the symptoms like fatigue, brain fog, could be weight gain, could be insomnia, could be panic attacks, anxiety, all kinds of other things like that. If you're in a crisis, think worse than that, right? So, for example, when I personally was in my adrenal crisis, I woke up with crazy vertigo. That was fun. I've had another patient who was out gardening, and all of a sudden her tongue swelled and she passed out. And her husband called me in a panic, and I was like, yeah, that's an adrenal crisis. So basically in a crisis, you've ignored the signs and you've pushed yourself way too far. And your body's like, and you're done. And it will let you know in a very real way. One of the ways we could look at it too, if you're familiar with Addison's disease. So Addison's disease is a failure of the adrenal glands. So you're no longer producing and regulating those hormones, and often have to rely on things like corticosteroids for the rest of your life. A very famous person with Addison's disease was John F. Kennedy, and he basically lived on pills and injections to keep him going. You can come back from a crisis if it's managed properly. Addison's disease is a whole nother topic that we'd have to get into, but basically the crisis is when your body's just shutting down.
What are your thoughts on a trending topic about testing adrenal fatigue through an eye test to hold your breath?
I wouldn't do it. In my practice, that's not how I do it. I honestly would have to do a lot more research on that kind of test because it's not one that I know much of, and would have to research it more before I could really tell you that I wouldn't do it.
All right.
I don't think those kinds of things are necessarily a good indicator of those types of things. I think your symptoms and some other testing like your inflammatory markers and your cortisol levels and things like that, I think are much more reliable than holding your breath. because there's a lot of other things that could cause issues with holding your breath. And while we're talking about that, I am going to start this on the stove. So now I'm gonna add in white wine because things are stuck at the bottom of the pan. So I'm gonna deglaze the pan with some white wine. And scrape up as much of that on the bottom as I can because that's all flavor. It's not burned, I promise. And it'll also, as I add in the broths and stuff, that'll come out too. So as that's burning off, I start adding in my base, which I start with gluten-free flour. I like this, the Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1 baking flour. Also, I should tell you, I don't cook by recipe. I cook by taste. So there's really no, I can't give you specifics, but I just start sprinkling in the flour. This will thicken it as we go. This is a pretty big batch, so probably a couple tablespoons, I'm gonna guess. Maybe a little bit more. I have to be really careful with this flour because it actually is, it'll thicken it a lot, and I've had to really, that's how I've ended up with like so much soup because I have to keep adding stuff in.
2 pots later.
2 pots later. Oh no, now it's the right consistency. And then I start adding in my spices. So I'm gonna start with some garlic powder. Also, something to be aware of, a lot of those, a lot of spices have a lot of additives in them. So you wanna be careful. I like the Simply Organic, or you can get some from Thrive Market, for example. Also, when you're building bases like this, I have found that it's always more than you think it should be in order to get the flavor profile that you want. So people see me putting in all these spices and I'm like, no, I promise it's gonna be okay. It's a ton. So this is onion powder. I'll do a little bit of that because I've got fresh onion in there too. Smoked paprika is one of my little tricks. I am a liberal spice user. Nutmeg. I love nutmeg. It's also really good for, actually for the immune system, for the adrenals, warms things up. A little bit of ground mustard. I should probably show this one, this camera instead. Okay, that's gonna drive me crazy, so I'm just gonna go rogue. So yeah, you do want to be careful. Salt and pepper, because a lot of the spices that you get just generic in the store have things like silicon dioxide in them as an anti-caking agent, which doesn't sound all that terrible until you've been adding this amount of spices to things for a while. You realize, oh my gosh, that is a lot. That's the wrong one. This is Himalayan rock salt, or pink salt. And I am pretty liberal with this. You can always salt more later. And I give that a good stir to get it all in there. And then I start adding in my broths. Again, I'm super careful about which ones I get because of the additives that can be in them. Low sodium. I make sure to get the ones that don't have things like red dye number 40, which has been shown to impair cognitive function and cause behavioral issues in kids and all kinds of fun things. So I'm a stickler for ingredients because if I wasn't, then I could just go get takeout, right? So I add in 1 to kind of get the base going and to also give me enough room to scrape the bottom and get all of the bacon yumminess, all the little pieces, I guess. I don't know what word I'm trying to find. I think I'm hungry.
Little bacon bits.
little bacon bits. This smells good. I'm hungry. I must be smelling better, so that's good.
It smells really good. Like really good.
Good.
Like you might want some through the video, and I highly recommend that you make this. And we'll make sure to include all the ingredients in the bottom, but just follow through. Just follow along and
you won't be disappointed.
no, not at all.
So then once I feel like I've scraped it as much as I can, there's always a little bit more I could do. Turn up the heat just a little bit. I've been doing this mostly over medium to medium high. And that looks like I might need a little bit more flour in there later, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, do another one. So it's all those hidden additives that you don't really know about. I certainly didn't know about until I started having to read labels because of my food allergies that I discovered, like gluten. I remember very specifically, I went to the store one day. I just wanted soup. That's all I wanted. I love soup. I don't know if you could tell. And I was reading all the ingredients after I had figured out that I really couldn't have gluten. I didn't figure out the other stuff for a while. Every can of soup I picked up had gluten and all these crazy additives, and I was like, oh my God, we've been eating this for so long. So it caused me to be pretty discerning when it comes to ingredients, so I am very picky about those. But the spices was one that was really surprising to me, where it was like, are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. And a lot of the pre-mixed spices, for example, if you get like a packet of taco seasoning, just read the back of that one day. Read the back. Just see what's in it. There's all kinds of crazy stuff in it and lots of sodium. And it's not the good kind of sodium that's more comprehensive. So that's what's going to cause issues with like blood pressure and swelling and that kind of thing. Don't get me wrong, too much of any salt isn't good, but I'm trying not to do too much of anything in this case, right? It did look like a lot of spices. Those are just spices. And also it gets diluted with all of the liquids that I'm putting in it. And I'm gonna add a couple more liquids at the end once everything's all cooked. So I'm gonna bring this up to a boil and let it simmer for just a few minutes until it's all fully incorporated, and make sure that my potatoes are cooked. Now I like whole potatoes. My husband likes it when I mash some of them in here, but he's not home right now. So I won't be mashing many of them. I might mash a little bit just to help with some of the thickness, but I tend to like big whole potatoes as long as they're cooked through. So some of these I might come through and chop just because they might be a little bit too big, because as you saw, my knife skills are not ideal, but I don't really care. So
I know we were talking a little bit about yoga, so do you have any recommending poses in yoga that will help with adrenal fatigue?
The restorative poses. So I am not a yoga teacher, so again, don't at me. I have friends who are yoga teachers, and I did a lot of yoga in the early stages of my healing. And the ones that we found that were, and actually there are some scientific things regarding this too, but the restorative poses like child's pose, happy baby, legs up the wall. I'm sure there's probably a term for that. I don't know. I just know it's called legs up the wall, where you literally sit and put your legs up the wall. I know that that is very effective at helping with the central nervous system. There's probably a few more in there. Oh, the forward fold, that can be a good one. Really just yoga in general, but I know those restorative poses specifically can be really helpful in cases of adrenal issues. So once all of the potatoes are cooked, I did end up mashing them just a little bit, but not a ton. And all my potatoes are pretty well cooked in here. I turn down the heat, and then I add in a little organic heavy whipping cream and a little half and half. Not a ton, but just enough to make it creamy. back in the day, this was done with no vegetable broth and all cream, and and it killed me. So
But how did it taste?
Ooh, what's that?
How did it taste?
It's very good, but this is, I didn't shake this well enough.
Oh, I see.
It's like, oh, that's not how I want that to come out. It's just the cream on top because it's heavy. So it looks, it's gonna look like it's curdled. It's not, I promise. I would not do that to Molly. Or me. Okay, there, that's a little bit better.
Yum.
And just a little half and half. I might add a little bit more half and half, but we'll see how that looks first. You don't want to do too much. Dairy for some people can be more inflammatory. Some people are not, they don't handle it very well. Yeah, I think I could do a bit more. Just half and half though.
When picking your heavy whipping cream and then also your half and half, is there a certain brand that you go after, or?
Organic. And I try to do, you know, the ones that say, like, this one's organic Vallery, although right now I'm just going for the best ingredients I can that are not $10,000 with the inflation the way that it is right now. So you just want to make sure it's the kind that says like no added hormones, no RBST, that kind of thing. I used to get milk at the farmer's market. I haven't been doing that lately because we really don't use a lot. I mean, that's why I have these tiny ones. When we were coffee drinkers, we did use a little bit more, not so much coffee drinkers anymore. Okay, so Molly's got to come taste test this for me. I love soups because they can be so flavorful and so filling.
It
But
literally packs a punch without being like overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's just so good.
and you know, people can
creaminess.
add more salt if they need to. You know, I just, like I said, I usually taste as I go. I've gotten out of the habit because I couldn't taste anything.
So delicious.